IBM, a name synonymous with innovation for over 100 years. From typewriters to barcodes, ATMs to PCs, we helped reach the moon, and we were in the AI game before it was cool. IBM has continually reinvented itself to do what it does best, solving the biggest challenges of the day through technology. And right now, we're putting hybrid cloud and AI at the core of everything we do. We are champions of openness, infusing the greatest innovations from the community. We are pioneering responsible AI, leading governance, and partnering with other institutions to advocate AI ethics. We're helping solve some of the biggest problems facing humanity, from climate change and sustainability to development and human rights. In the future, our global network of research scientists continues to be at the cutting edge of innovation. Whether it's in semiconductors or quantum computing, we're shaping the future, one breakthrough at a time.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Please give everyone a round of applause. I'm Margarita, a producer at Intelligence Squared, and we are extremely proud to partner with IBM to host this series of pivotal conversations. For over a century, IBM has been at the heart of the world's most significant technological shifts. Today, as we face a new era of intelligent machines, the stakes for the UK have never been higher. Tonight's conversation is about the realities of the age of intelligence. AI is accelerating at an extraordinary speed, but might also be exposing us to new and increasingly sophisticated cyber threats. So as technology becomes more powerful, the question is no longer simply how quickly we can adopt it, but how responsibly and securely we can build it. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce the host for tonight's evening. Kamal Ahmed is the Executive Editorial Director for Fortune Europe. Please give him a very warm round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you, Margarita. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out and listening to an in-person event. There's no AI on stage, I am told. Although it's so good now, who knows quite, are these three people real? I will introduce them and we can start testing. On my far left, not politically, of course, but, well, who knows, I don't know, but is not only a very good friend of mine, Jon and I have worked for many years together at the BBC, but of course, one of the UK's best-known journalists, former North America editor for the BBC. In 2022, launched the News Agents podcast alongside Lewis Goodall and Emily Maitlis. And in 2023, launched the News Agents US with Emily. And in addition to the News Agents, author of a trilogy of fabulous books on the Trump presidency, as well as Strangleland, How Britain Stopped Making Sense. Jon, thank you so much for joining us. Dimple, in the middle. Dimple is the global offering leader for IBM CyberDefend within IBM Consulting. Now, Dimple and I met an hour or so ago.
We did.
And I read that out to Dimple, and I must admit, I had to slightly pause and ask, Dimple, what is a global offering leader, just in case any of you aren't as smart as us on the panel and not quite sure what that means. But Dimple, help us with what a global offering leader does.
Of course. Look, fancy titles that companies come up with aside, I'm a security practitioner at heart. And so this role gives me the ability to kind of look a little bit around the corner of what are the type of challenges, business challenges, certainly cyber risk related or influenced ones that organizations are going to experience, and then build solutions and go work with clients to see how they work for them. So it's really anticipating a need and catering to it.
Well, we're very glad to have you here, Dimple. You've got over 22 years experience in cybersecurity, and boy, do we need that at the moment. As you say, you lead the CyberDefend team and the global team that helps enterprises run securely at scale. Also, indeed, a vital skill. Engineering protection in identities, data, applications, and the platforms that we all use every day. And also, a word here which we will get to in our conversation, the quantum future, which I must admit if we think we're in a situation now where we might be in 5-10 years,
Exactly.
could be a whole different scale of
Indeed.
issues for us to think about. So Dimple, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And then just on my direct left, Matt Rowe. Matt is the Chief Security Officer, the CISO at Lloyds Banking Group, where he leads the group's security strategy and capabilities across cyber, physical and operational domains. Career spanning senior leadership roles in the government. Congratulations that you managed to get out of that. The Bank of England and Nationwide Building Society prior to Lloyds Banking Group. Wealth of experience in financial services, resilience and security transformation. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us. So we will chat away as if you're not really here in a really relaxed manner for the next hour or so, a little bit less than that. There'll be a couple of moments for you to do a little bit of work whilst we're having that conversation. And then at 8:30 or so, we'll have a Q&A. So plenty of questions from the audience. The lights will come up. Your hands will shoot in the air as one, because you're going to be so enthusiastic about the super questions you want to ask that I've completely failed to ask from the panel stage. And then we'll wrap at around 9 o'clock. So thank you so much for joining us. But there is a podcast series that goes alongside this set of in-person events, supported by IBM and Intelligence Squared, and do go onto the Intelligence Squared website to find out where you can get to play those. And we recorded one yesterday at IBM's London HQ near the South Bank. And Gavin Kenny, security expert, colleague of yours, Dimple, from IBM, he made a very interesting point to me whilst I was interviewing him about cybersecurity. And he said, have you ever considered, Kamal, the 3 a.m. test? And how many people fail the 3 a.m. test? And Dimple, this was the 3 a.m. test that he set for me. And I must admit, I have borderline almost failed it. But I want to ask you, as a cybersecurity expert, if you've ever found yourself trapped in this moment. And the 3 a.m. test is this, and this gets to the idea of security not always being about malevolent actors, but just being about trying to do your best. So, 3 o'clock in the morning, you suddenly get this urgent requirement that you need to deliver some work for that morning, in whichever territory you may be. Let's say we're in London, but you need to deliver it for 9 a.m. that morning, and you are sent a data set about a crisis situation that you cannot open. And however much you try to open it on your computer, this is completely legitimate. It's come from a person you know. It's not a phishing thing. And then suddenly your computer offers you all sorts of methods for opening that data set. And you're scrolling through, you're thinking, I've got to get this thing open. This thing really, really matters to my business, to my clients, to my partners. Has there been a moment, Dimple, where you've almost pressed the wrong button, or even maybe it's the right button, and you've thought, I'm just going to get that thing across because I need to open this data set?
Wow.
And Gavin's point was that almost everybody fails at that moment because they're trying to do their best.
Yeah, you know what? I believe it. I think that's why so many organizations tend to do, I'll call it an efficacy test, because everybody gets inundated with all sorts of education. And so let's put it to test. And we do find that, right? My 3 a.m., okay, it won't be work-related in the sense that...
You're far too clever.
But life, no. I wish that was the case. But I think life test. So I'm a doting aunt of many. And holiday season, I found myself a couple years ago. You said time zone, Kamal, and yes, I'm all over the world and traveling and sometimes losing track of time, unfortunately. And that particular holiday season, I found myself in a bit of a panic because I had not done my responsible duties of being that doting aunt and ordering all the gifts. So there must be somebody or some algorithm, something like I was in this frenzy of just ordering stuff and making sure it gets delivered in different parts of the world. And in between all my confirmation of emails that, order accepted, order processing, order shipped, I received a note that says there was a order declined or that the courier couldn't deliver it. And if I wanted to check on the status of it, just click. Now, I will admit, all of my cyber training and experience and being that practitioner at heart was not what I was thinking at that 3 a.m. moment. And it may have been 2:33. I think it's pretty darn close of Gavin of picking that time frame. And I did find myself almost clicking on that link to see which poor child and niece, nephew of mine was not going to be getting a gift from their aunt. So yeah, I think it's a human thing.
Matt, as an expert in this field, can you sense that colleagues, others, you can see when someone is trying to do the right thing with no malicious intent, and they're at a moment of a degree of pressure, maybe tired, and it's a crisis situation, and it's a completely genuine request, that there can be a tendency to fail the 3 a.m. test. And has it ever almost got to you?
Obviously not. No, never. And it's the same. So I've had a few moments where I've got very close and then caught myself, because we are all human. And I guess the broader point I'd make here, our work leading security programs is to design out the need for the human to do the correct or the right thing, to know exactly what to do at all times. And if they make a mistake because they're tired or stressed or whatever, that could be catastrophic. We have to design that out. Any security model that is dependent on the human always knowing the right thing and doing the right thing is ultimately going to fail. So that's the big picture. We have to get to a place in the design of our security controls where it's not dependent on the human at 3 a.m. Avoiding clicking that link, which kind of seems similar to the thing that they're actually trying to do.
John, you and I, journalists, often at the absolute edge of sort of deadlines, timings, dealing with lots of incoming information and demands then to create outputs from those incoming, that incoming product to us. And you have to be on air in 20 seconds. They're counting you down in your ear. Something asks you a question that you think, I need to see this before I go on. 15 seconds to go, John. Counting you down, 15, 14. Has there been... That's a sort of 3 a.m. moment that you and I possibly live through much more often than 3 a.m.
How long do you want me to spend answering this? I was, as you said in the introduction, I was the BBC's North America editor. And so London was always 5 hours ahead of Washington, which is where I lived. And so there would often be 3 o'clock in the morning calls because it was 8 o'clock in the morning London. And you'd get some mad call from the duty editor on the desk saying, this has happened. We want you to be on the next flight out, and we've booked you on a flight at 6:30 in the morning from Reagan National Airport or whatever. Go now. And there was one time when I got a call. I was woken up in the middle of the night, and I said, "Can you just tell the foreign editor that he's a total wanker and doesn't know what the F he's doing?" And he said, "No, you can." And I said, "No, I'm not going to." Anyway, I wrote a note, which I thought was to the foreign editor, saying, "Can you tell he's a total and he doesn't know what he's doing?" And I sent it to him directly because I was half asleep. I hadn't thought of what I was doing, and then had a bit of explaining to do why I'd sent this email in some haste. And that is the sort of thing where we all make that mistake. And I was saying to the guys before we came on stage, yesterday and today I was in Paris at a conference that I was sort of slightly involved in. And there was this whole session on cyber. And the CEO and chairman of this company, which is a globally significant company, and they had a reception at the Rodin Museum last night, and it was very plush and champagne a go-go, and they had hired two magicians. And the magician said, "Give me your phone," to the chief executive. And the chief executive hands over his phone, and they're mucking around with his phone. And I'm thinking, if your head of security could see what you have just done.
Honestly, just having a moment.
I'm envisioning
and
this.
on stage that afternoon, this guy had been talking about the critical importance of cybersecurity and dealing with the threats and don't doing stupid shit. And here he was handing his phone to two magicians who were, nothing malicious happened, but people who know better do dumb stuff.
So that's about, Matt, to your point, taking the human actually out of the loop, not putting them in it in any sense, which I think is really important. A couple of points in the research that the brilliant IBM and Intelligence Squared put together for me for this, which I must admit I found quite shocking. So we, of course, are all... When AI became consumer, the whole debate on AI changed. Of course, AI is many different things and has been with us for many decades. But when it became a consumer product under ChatGPT, the whole basis of the conversation changed, because suddenly everybody could have an engagement point with artificial intelligence, and it became very real. So that's been where the conversation is. But in IBM's annual cost of data breach report, it does seem, to the points you've all made, that there are so many moments when you can skip over security because particularly agentic AI systems can seem to have a quick fix. You think, oh, well, I could just fix that little productivity thing, but you haven't layered on the security implications of what you're trying to do. The average cost of a data breach is $4.44 million to a business. The average cost of a data breach. And in America, which I would have imagined would be different, the actual cost is far, far higher, presuming that's around size as well as number of companies within it. 10.22 million, the average cost in dollars. And healthcare, the healthcare sector, which both officially and for our own well-being is one that lots of us in this room will be engaged in, is the one which remains the one that suffers under the most expense when it comes to breaches. The healthcare industry is the one where clearly some of those things they put in to make their services to all of us better are also increasing their risk potential. Another astonishing thing which I didn't realize, I did actually when I was doing the podcast yesterday, security breaches remain uncontained for an average of 279 days, just operating away before the company can get in control of the breach that is happening. Half are malicious or criminal, and 65% of organizations that have been the victim of a data breach say they have yet to recover long after the breach has actually happened. And also, there is no formal governance for what's called shadow AI. So that's us using these new consumer AI products for our work and introducing them into our workflows, because we, of course, use them on our smartphones, and lots of them are very, very good. But that shadow AI breach problem is growing, and that in itself can cost up to $1 million for each breach that happens. So it's quite a gloomy picture. And just off the back of that, obviously I've maybe slightly nudged you in a certain direction. There's going to be the first question. Now, I think this is called the age of intelligence, this thing. So probably some of you are intelligent enough to have seen the question go up on screen before you came in and may well have answered it. But the first poll question we want to ask you, and if you haven't done the QR code, please do it now, and then you can answer the question on the screen. And the question is, in today's cybersecurity landscape, who currently holds the strategic advantage? Attackers, i.e. those attempting to breach, or defenders, Dimple and Matt, basically. You are our defenders. Who's winning in the battle? And whilst you're just putting your answers in, and some of you may have already done that, I'm actually going to ask Dimple. How is the balance looking, given those really grim numbers, that on maybe on the side of the fence of enterprise, i.e. the businesses themselves, like the human errors that we make at 3 o'clock in the morning, are enterprises thinking carefully enough about what's the security implication of this new piece of productive kit that we can possibly use, or of the new workflows that we're putting in place? Are the attackers or the defenders winning the war?
You said strategic. So I would say tactically, the attackers. Strategically, the defenders. And I'll explain why I say that, because it's understandable. Look, attacks get publicized. Lots of people feel the impact, all kinds of stuff. It's a little drama that people get to experience. Defenders only get in we like not to be in the news because that means we're doing a good job. And for the attackers, they have to get it right once. But the defenders are using also AI to level the playing field a bit. And so with automated defenses and all those type of things, I think long term, the defenders have the strategic advantage because it enables us to look at really being able to secure organizations and manage cyber risk better without losing speed. So,
defenders strategically, Matt, is that your sense from Lloyds Bank side of the fence that you obviously will be under, all enterprises are under constant attack, possibly? Attackers or defenders in the lead at the moment?
Yeah, I do agree. And going back to your first data point, why is that true? Because it's actually really hard to do a good job of security. It's expensive, it requires expertise, things that are not available to every enterprise. Nobody builds a company or deploys a new service or a new product wanting it to be insecure and hoping it gets hacked. Nobody does that. So the reason that we have the conditions where firms are getting breached is because it's really, really hard. And it's asymmetrical. The attackers will just keep trying, will keep trying. They've got fantastic incentives because if they are successful, they get paid or they achieve their sort of broader objectives. Yeah. And yet, the moment we're in now, I do think is strategically giving defenders an advantage because some of the capabilities that are becoming available to us, they're really well disposed to helping us solve these hard problems. Cybersecurity is a big data problem. AI and machine learning is really well disposed to solving big data problems. And on the defender side, we've got home field advantage. We know our environment. We can use AI to really illuminate any security flaws and close them and harden it if we do a good job of that.
Dimple, I thought it was interesting, tactically, your sense, the attackers, because there is this sense that fear is part of the attacker's game. So every time there's publicity, people think it's everywhere. Marks and Spencer, British Library, Cooperative Society. You hear a lot of noise, and it makes people fearful. And in a way, in an asymmetric battle, and you've sort of almost made the link, with different types of almost warfare. In an asymmetric battle, the attackers always have that fear as part of their advantage. That's a really interesting point, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you started us off by asking our 3 a.m. moment, right? Like, it's the same thing as it's a little bit of instilling that fear. And then the urgency that we all feel when we think that something needs to happen, right? And sometimes you don't make those right decisions. But yeah, absolutely.
Jon, has it surprised you? We've got the actual figures there. So 84% of the people in the room think the attackers are in the lead.
We need
maybe
our own PR.
Matt and Dimple, maybe when they've heard you, they may want to change their vote, but who knows? I don't think we can test it at the end, but anyway, we could do that. But Jon, does that surprise you in terms of the public mood around the technological revolution we're in, AI, agentic AI, particularly, which learns and then offers solutions or actually goes away and does new work that you haven't actually directly asked it to do, learns from what it is that you've tasked it with. So, do you get a sense that the public are in a very negative state?
I wouldn't put it as negative or positive. I think we're fearful. And I think that you read about, Jaguar Land Rover and what happened there, that they needed a government bailout loan. Such was the devastating effect on the company. And you think, wow, everything's insecure. Or you hear that there's been a massive data breach and people have got hold of your personal records. And then there was the nursery where they were going to put up online, the pictures of small kids and their addresses and stuff like that. And I think that understandably, it feels incredibly personal. And so I understand that people are unbelievably fearful about the consequences of that. And, you know, look, you kind of likened it to warfare. When we hear there has been a terrorist attack in London or in our community, we are scared. What we fail to recognize is how often MI5 and MI6 are actually thwarting an operation. That doesn't make us feel less scared. We only notice when things go wrong. And I think government is acutely aware of that as well. And I think government has all sorts of, you know, is it a state actor? Is it a non-state actor? What is the motivation of this? And you raised a really interesting question about all of this. Is, you know, it's almost like warfare. Well, what happens if you take down some piece of critical infrastructure and you identify that as being a state actor, a Russia, a China, a North Korea, or Iran, where, you know, there is high capability and maybe a willingness to do this? When is it war? Because there is a point, presumably, where if you shut down the water supply or you shut down the electricity grid, it is.
Jon, as soon as you delve into this subject, I always find you are so astonished by the importance of the debate. It seems surprising in our world, the media world, that it's not sort of front and center of a lot of the coverage of the media in terms of what is important and what will be looked back on in 20 years' time as one of the most important issues of the era we're living in now. Jon, as a political expert, we are in a situation when we have a very noisy possible horse race between the challenges to Keir Starmer and what might happen there, and will we have the same Prime Minister in 6 months' time or in a year's time, whatever. You put it very well when we were chatting just in the green room here. You asked yourself the question, which I thought was a very smart way of pushing it, which was, how many newsagent episodes of the past 3 months, 6 months, have been about AI intelligence and security risk, and how many have been about the horse race of politics?
I'm almost ashamed to give the answer to this room, because the fact of the matter is that daily, oh my God, is Starmer done for now? Is West Streeting really going to go for it? You know, that breathless sort of political analysis and what's driving it, and you know, what's motivating the different political forces, or the latest thing that Donald Trump has posted about annihilating a civilization in a night, you know, destroying Iran. That does really well for us. And you do an episode which is AI going to do X, Y, or Z? And we get the data back the next day, doesn't do so well. Now, it should do, because AI is changing the way we're going to live. AI for 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds coming out of school or university is going to change the availability of jobs in nearly every area of our lives. AI is upending it. And so when the history is written of the 2020s, I fear that what I have done that much on the podcast will occupy that much in the pages of history, and what we've done that much on the podcast on AI will occupy that much in the history. And I think there is an asymmetry between what is froth and what really matters. This is like I feel like I'm in a confession box now, admitting the shortcomings of my trade. But I think it's absolutely true, and I'm glad that we're having this conversation tonight, because I think that the implications are massive, and the implications for public policy, for governance, for democracy. And it's not just about companies' bottom lines, although if you're M&S and you're the cooperative society...
We've seen the costs.
Yeah, yep. You've seen the costs, which are massive. And I read some statistic that, you know, SMEs, if they don't have insurance against a hack or a cyber attack, then 60% of them go under. And that is, that's part of the supply chain. They may not be the size of JLR, Jaguar Land Rover. But if they were supplying parts to Jaguar Land Rover and they go under because they didn't have, they're not a Lloyd's where they can't spend the same amount of money on cybersecurity, then these are real world influences and things that are happening now.
No. Matt, can I bring you in? So Jon raised a very interesting point around, significant nationally important infrastructure. And the banking system, obviously, is one of those sectors. How do you approach it with that knowledge? And how much is a partnership with others? Because it shouldn't, and maybe it can't be, all down to just what Lloyds Bank does. There has to be a process, a system, your partners in the financial services, the government, the regulators. And then maybe just to push a little bit, again, what Jon has raised, you are, I think, the biggest SME bank for the UK. It's quite an interesting point that Jon makes, that one of their resilience issues when you are supporting them on their growth, et cetera, could well be cybersecurity. But just on that first point, national resilience and how we should approach that.
Yeah, so I'll say something on each. On that point, that's the mission. So the way that we think about it, protecting Lloyds Banking Group is protecting UK economy, which is protecting UK society. There's a straight line all the way through. So that is like a higher order thing. That's why we take this stuff really seriously, and we need to do a brilliant job of it every day. That absolutely is how we think about this work, and it connects to what Jon was saying. This is a really big deal. It's a really big deal, and it's the thing that successes people don't notice. To your wider point, and absolutely, we need the whole ecosystem to be secure. And that is where it gets more complicated because of different economic models, different resource profiles, the availability of expertise. So we're thinking really hard, working with government, the National Cybersecurity Centre, the National Centre for Resilience, to work out how do you raise standards right across the board, and how do you empower organisations to raise standards based on their business model. Because not everybody can and not everybody should do it like a large enterprise. And I just connect it to the thing we were talking about before. We're in a really interesting moment where, it's extremely volatile. The world is extremely volatile with the pace of change, geopolitics, technology developments. And at the same time, we have suddenly been given these tools that actually can democratize really effective security if we do a good job of it. So we see that we have a role in that, for sure.
Yep. Dimple, just as an expert, 20 plus years in cybersecurity, when you see a Jaguar Land Rover, British Library, Marks and Spencer, what lessons do IBM's partners take from that around cyber resilience and preparedness? Or it can sometimes be, there's a cost of doing business, and these things happen, and we just need to kind of keep playing on. Because I find sometimes when you're talking about cybersecurity, it's one of those slight, at the board level, slight, not Cinderella would be too pejorative and negative, but it's not the big, sexy, shiny thing. What you're not doing is, you're defending. So you haven't got, it's not the big new product, the big new brand campaign, the big new thing for the bottom line. It's cybersecurity. It's the stuff that has to happen every day relentlessly. Just wondered what your response is when you see the headlines about those companies that have been so flawed by a cybersecurity breach in their systems.
So, one thing I would say is that cyber was definitely seen as a cost of doing business in the past. Perhaps it's the optimist in me, but I do see a shift in that more senior leaders are starting to recognize it as a business enabler. I kind of use the analogy. IBM's been doing a lot of stuff with Ferrari recently, so cars are on my mind. But I was kind of thinking about that when seatbelts were introduced, in the early days, it allowed people to go faster. And I kind of equate that to cyber, in that businesses, as they're venturing into new growth areas, whether that's products, services, whether it's new geographies, expansion, mergers, acquisitions, whatever. I think they've started to recognize, one, that they can do that with a little bit more peace of mind and security, if security is built in, right? So I think from all of these incidents, we were just talking a minute ago about how attackers have been able to instill fear by publicized. I'd like to say that there's always a takeaway lesson that's learned, and hopefully others take note of that when these things happen, because all of these incidents have taught us about the importance of resiliency. And that means anticipate that there will be some sort of a flaw, and that flaw will get exploited, and prepare a plan for it. Practice it, and practice it, and practice it. So you build a muscle memory, right? And then figure out how you're going to manage one of the most important things that organizations have to deal with, which is how do you maintain the trust of your stakeholders, right? So when we hear about the JLRs, we hear about the MNSs and all those, it's a little bit of how do you take those moments and apply them for learning, for improvement, for growth. And then the other thing, part of it, I would say, is none of us work alone as organizations. So it's a little bit of that conversation also that needs to happen between partners to make sure that your partners are taking security just as seriously as your organization is attempting to do, right? So making sure that there's clarity around who your businesses are dependent on as partners, and how you manage those relationships, particularly from a security standpoint.
No.
Can I just add one point? And we've talked quite a few times about breached organisations so far tonight, and I do think that we've got to be careful about victim shaming, because it is hard to do a good job of this. And at the end of the day, the problem is like that the attackers are able to get away with this. If I wander home tonight and I get mugged, this room won't spend the next 6 months talking about how that Matt Rowe's an idiot for getting mugged, probably, depending on the circumstances. The conversation would more likely be about safety, would
Correct.
be about law enforcement, would be about lighting, the way that actually crime has been allowed to grow in certain categories in certain areas. And I do think we need to flip the conversation a little bit, which goes to the essence of your question, which is actually how do we make the whole ecosystem more safe by design?
Correct.
And that's not about a firm that gets breached. It's about the whole system.
Yeah, and the point, Matt, you were making, this is very hard work. And so many chief executives, particularly of global enterprises, even at the table stakes issue of do all their data sets, are they able to speak to each other? All these stacks that may have come from different companies during takeover situations, during joint ventures.
Exactly.
I remember speaking to Stephen Hester many years ago when he was the sort of rescue CEO for RBS, saying to me in an interview that RBS's computer systems, Royal Bank of Scotland's computer systems, were like a massive plate of sort of slightly mouldering spaghetti, just all different. You couldn't unravel them. It was impossible to understand. It didn't even know the information it didn't know about its business under previous leadership. And of course, the financial crisis revealed how little the banks knew about their actual jobs. And that is still extant. We're nearly 20 years on from the financial crisis. This is not about banking, but for so many organizations, they don't have a clean data stack that can speak across geographies, across different divisions. And that has got to be the start of the hard yards, is that cleansing of what is the ability of our data system to speak to each other.
Indeed. I would say, you mentioned about companies and how certainly large companies with complex environments, right? many organizations who've been in business for a while, they don't have the advantage of the startup. Well, they have some advantages comparatively, but nonetheless, these are messy environments. So not only do the data sets sometimes don't talk to each other, part of it is also some systems can't and shouldn't be upgraded on a rapid path, right? We've been talking about, or at least, the conversation so far has been more around traditional IT environments. You've got systems, operating systems, applications, databases, and all that kind of stuff. Now, I think the conversation gets even a little bit more interesting when you think about operational technology. It's things that we don't think much about, but until those moments of crisis, when the water supply isn't there, when a transit system is crippled, things that we all rely on as society. So I think certainly there's more attention around it. The resilience part, I think it is we in cyber like to look at cyber as a team sport. And that's why I was mentioning even the importance of knowing what your partners are doing and such. So I think in these cases, it's, I'm going to go back to my earlier point about devising a plan for those moments and just like you would and exercising those muscles. And I think we need to do a far better job as defenders to talk about the positive aspects of it, right? So you made a great point. I love the analogy about, well, I hope you'll reach home safely, but I think you make a great point. It's that so much of the focus is on, well, what didn't that company do? They put us at risk. I don't know how many letters I get that say your data has been compromised. So sorry, we'll provide you a monitoring service. And that's lovely because I will be monitored till I'm into my senior years here. But I think we have to also start looking at learning, at applying, at sharing, without that risk of, well...
Is that hard to do? Because we're in places of high security, Matt. We're in, a competitive environment. We also have to be very careful about the data we own. So that sharing bit is actually... can be hard work when there are, many, many different themes at play around how you do share and then maybe even externally, publicly share, this is what we did.
Yeah, look, there are lots of reasons where people tend to shy away from it. Certainly public perception and trust, which is important for anyone as individuals or organizations to maintain. There's the regulatory aspect. It's when regulations get defined, it seems logical. It's in the interest of everybody, but like Matt was saying, this is hard stuff. And when you start putting what are the penalties associated with some of these things, people have a tendency not to share. And I think that's a true shame, because we only improve if we learn with each other, from each other, and then collectively strengthen the defenses. Because as one organization does their bit, the other one also benefits from it, particularly in this interdependent society that we live in.
Yeah. Jon, American politics, UK, European politics. Just in your time in America, was there a more expert engagement? Did you ever get a sense in these type of issues we're talking about here, not just maybe cybersecurity, but the broader issues around AI? Obviously, America and China are in the lead on the debate. And in America, that is a debate run largely by a handful of very large businesses. In the political system, were there any differences or things that we could learn from America or vice versa? I just wondered if you felt there was a difference between how America politically approached some of these issues and the UK. And did you feel more comfortable talking about some of these issues, whether or not you can get it on the news agents is a different matter, in the UK than maybe you did when you were in America?
Well, the one obvious point to make, and it kind of may seem a weird one to make, is nationalism and economic nationalism. I mean, I was out there when the US government was banning Huawei from anything to do with any American government company, and the idea that the British government, when I think it was Theresa May was the Prime Minister, and that, Huawei was going to be kind of part of the 5G infrastructure and working with BT to install kind of cables and everything else. And the American government was going mad about it. I mean, really furious about it. It's kind of like the NATO debate now, but it was about AI, it was about the technology companies of China and whether they should be able to get any kind of foothold. And the argument was always presented in America that this was about national security. It was never presented in the way, well, might it just be a bit of protectionism? I mean, in the same way that, I remember, I think it was in Dubai, the Port Authority was going to buy a port in Baltimore. And they were absolutely banned from doing that because we couldn't have an Arab country running a port in America, and that on national security grounds, that was scotched. And so the big difference there...
Did you feel that was right, John? Do you think that that was actually true, or was this cover for a political argument?
I think it was... Well, I think there was a bit of both. I think there was, there was uncertainty over what China was capable of doing with spyware and all the rest of it. Therefore, why take the risk? But I also think it was about championing American companies. And if you look now at the race that's going on, and I think it's really fascinating what's happening, and maybe we can talk about this a tiny bit, is with Mythos, the Anthropic kind of AI model that the owners have declared is so powerful and so terrifying, they're not going to release it to the public. And I'm thinking, is that good marketing, or is this, everyone will want Mythos when it comes out, or is this real? And there is that. But what I, further to Matt and Dimple's points, what I understand is happening now. There is now this thing called Project Glasswing going on, where certain key banks and insurance companies and vital US companies are being brought in by Anthropic to look at it. And, in your defender-attacker paradigm, I think that there is a thought that this could give I'm wading way out of my depth here, and I'm going to leave it to you to talk about the reality of the technology of this. But that actually it is so effective as a tool in identifying, security weaknesses in a company's cybersecurity net setup, that it will be an incredibly powerful tool for the defenders in future.
Because they say there's been a suggestion, Anthropic made the suggestion that, they were finding breach capabilities that were sort of laid dormant for like 26 years and things, and were just sitting there waiting for this new hyper-powered system to be able to sort that out on the defender's side. But Dimple, how, fortunately we talk always to chief executives, how are they supposed to make sense of this point that a handful of companies, and broadly 4 American chief executives and 1 UK founder, DeepMind, Demis Hassabis, are making decisions on my ability to keep my company safe and whether they even give it to me? How are boards and C-suite executives supposed to make sense of how to do the governance, the structures, when, and we haven't even gotten to quantum yet, as John says, companies like Anthropic and the others are making these types of announcements? Yeah,
look, I think Anthropic has done a fabulous job of marketing. I will, as having been in marketing in one time of my profession, I have to admire what they've been able to accomplish. It's like capturing the imagination of the world in many cases. The way, and Anthropic is not the only frontier model that is available. And I think people have a tendency to think, well, do you have Anthropic? How do I get Anthropic? And it kind of focuses the conversation in a different area than it should. I would say, John, to what you just said, I think the future is now in terms of can defenders use it? when I was talking about what an offering leader is, it is what's around the corner. It wasn't out of the realm of possibility or science fiction that something like this could happen. And so one of the things that, I had the fortune of working with colleagues, not only within IBM, but our strategic partners, our strategic clients, is anticipating forward and developing what we're looking at as autonomous security. So just like frontier models have identified the ability to identify those decades-old vulnerabilities that have existed, perhaps in systems that couldn't be updated or weren't updated for various reasons, similarly, we're looking at how do you apply that to automate defenses, right? So if something is going to move at the speed of AI to attack, the defenders have to do the same. And Matt and I were talking about that a little bit earlier. So what we've been talking to clients since this whole Mythos thing, it's been a fabulous way to have that conversation with different stakeholders at a board level, at a C-suite level, right? And really talking about how do you look at data that they're using today to monetize because of the value it provides and it's proprietary and it provides intelligence and all that kind of stuff, is how do you protect it? And how do you protect it at all stages? And how do you do it with speed? And that's the second part, because perception for security is, when I started my career in security, I used to get a whole lot of eyes rolling in the back of the head like, oh, you're one of them. You're going to tell me thou shall not. And we were kind of like the naysayers. I was seen as a blocker, right? Like, what are you going to tell me that I can't do? And now it's about, use AI. Let us tell you what the use cases are that you should be doing so intentionally. Where's your data traveling to? Be more knowledgeable about that. Who has access to it? For what purpose? How are you going to manage it? And then on the defense side of it is how are you going to protect it, right? So once you know your crown jewels are things that your company absolutely requires to function, how are you going to protect it? And then that's where we've been introducing more autonomous security. And that's a rapidly evolving area where it feels like the last 3 weeks of my life are probably 3 years. Literally, I mean, it's been that rapid around adoption and really bringing together better visibility into the organization with thank you frontier models, but then also how do you assess what the risk associated with it is? How do you protect where it's reflective of the risk that you're willing to take with that type of data, right? And so automating all these different parts of organizations where we tended to work in silos. So one team is looking at your identities. One team is looking at responding to threats. One team is looking at your cloud footprint and all the workloads. And being able to pull that information together, and of course, with the appropriate guardrails, being able to automate where things should be and maintaining human in the loop where they can't be. And so that's really been the conversation with CEOs of late, is not to suggest don't look at using for the benefit, but really how do you do it with my seatbelt analogy?
Yeah, so it's a different type of conversation. Now, we're coming to questions quite soon, but also there is one more question via the super clever system we have here, which I think is now going to go up again with a second question for you to answer. So grab those phones that have obviously been listening from China all the way through this in any case. So grab your phones, do answer the question, which is, after this discussion, what do you think is the most urgent priority for organizations? And there's 3 options there for you to pick. And obviously, it may be a bit of some of them, but just which one do you think is the most important of those 3? But just while we're getting the answers on that, Matt, I talked about shadow AI at the beginning of this, which is that people will be using in their everyday life things that they are told is going to help you. Clear up your calendar. Give these new agentic AI models access to your systems, and it acts like you've got your own EA. You've got your own support staff. You've got your own team. And you go into work and you've got this thing working away and you think, I'll just stick it into my work emails and into my work calendar, because of course I need to align, my meeting with XYZ and pick up the dry cleaning, and I've got to, pick up Anna from whatever in the evening, my kids or whatever it might be. When we talk about shadow AI, how would you say that we should be thinking about it? Because some of us may already be behaving like that, I don't know. But also, how do businesses approach? How does Lloyds Bank approach the fact that on here, a lot of your teams can have systems constantly encouraging them to say, have your own support staff?
The main response is to, shadow AI is a risk. Let's just ground that. It's absolutely a risk. And therefore you pay attention to it. The main response from our perspective is to give people the most brilliant experiences through their work technology. So we've touched on it a little bit, but classically, the security organization would be the Ministry of No, with rate limit, everything was a problem, and put in friction and blocks and frankly just force users off your organization's technology and sort of force them onto that kind of shadow construct. So our job is to enable brilliant, safe experiences on work technology. So you can have your kind of Billy Basic AI running on your own tech, but if you want the real stuff, then you'll use your work technology to get the job done. And our approach in LBG is that you can do the stuff that you need to do for your home life through your work technology. And that's a complete inversion of how we used to operate. Because that's the way to
that's very good for Lloyds Bank, I get that.
Yeah.
But to Jon's point, not every business is going to be able to operate at this type of scale that you can operate and with the expertise that you can operate with.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
But let me just connect it to what we were just talking about. And what I will say on the latest frontier models, they are the most powerful AI models and tools that we've ever had. They are the least powerful they will ever be. Okay, so there is a lot of high five to Anthropic for the marketing job. It is fantastic marketing, and it's real. And the important thing is not whether you've got access to Mythos, yes or no. It's a data point on a trend line, because the ability for models to do this is only going to become more efficient, effective, and faster. So why do I say all of that? We've got to meet the moment. We have got to use these capabilities for defender advantage. And the thing that you said is the purview of a large enterprise. We have to democratize it. We have to ensure that these capabilities can be put into the good guys' hands with the appropriate safety guardrails, so that we kind of mitigate these set of really structural risks that will otherwise exist. Go back to what Jon was talking about, and that needs to be a whole of society conversation. It needs to involve public policy, it needs to involve regulation, it needs to involve the business ecosystem traveling together. And it's a conversation that we're kind of not having because we're distracted by, I don't know, whatever happened this morning. But this is the really big shift we're living through.
Yeah. I wonder, Jon, we've just seen the answers there to the questions. I wonder whether that is actually reflecting in the audience. Do all three? i.e., we can't really choose between all three of those. We should be doing them all. Jon, is there hope that it is certainly, because it's gone consumer, ChatGPT changed the way it was discussed? So I think that's a gain, that suddenly there was something that touched the public in a really major way. Do you have a degree of optimism that, obviously we are doing events like this for this very reason, but that we will have that conversation and that people will really start to focus on the opportunities as well as the risks of this subject?
I think it's really interesting, the speed with which, it's very easy to mock Trump and all the rest of it, but there are bits of what they're doing in America where they have woken up to the power of this stuff and the way that it can upend society without thinking carefully about what the implications of this technology is and what it can do and how it's going to change people's lives. And I think that conversation is taking place in America now. So it's not just kind of the Wild West of these 5 tech bros who are trying to, be the first squillionaire. Although there are elements of that undoubtedly taking place in America. So I think the conversation is taking place. Is governance, is our legislation keeping pace with the technology, nowhere near. But I think that there is a growing awareness of people in government that are working pretty well on this stuff. I mean, I think in Europe, they're much more alive to the dangers, and I think in Europe there is a risk of perhaps being left behind by the limitations of what you're saying AI companies can do, and kind of layering it with additional responsibilities, which of course you're not getting in America. And not for the first time in history, Britain is somewhere in between, although potentially closer to America in the way that it's looking at AI. But I was with the other week a former head of GCHQ. And he was talking about the things that he's really alarmed about. Yeah, we can keep the focus narrow on companies and their bottom lines and interruption to supply lines. But they're really worried about misinformation campaigns on a massive scale. Where you have got foreign governments campaigning in your politics, sowing discontent. There's a lot of that stuff that's already out there. And if that becomes better organized, governments are thinking, or countries are thinking, how can we protect our democracy from attacks like this? And so, politicians have to be alert to this stuff because it has gone consumer, but at its biggest scale, the disruption potential is epic.
Dimple, just before we come to questions, quantum, we just touched on it in a sort of a way that I remember I was at the Intelligence Squared event with Demis Hassabis and his new biographer. And he's used this line before, and actually he did it at Davos as well, which is, artificial general intelligence. He says, it's quite a long way away. And I asked him at Davos, at the World Economic Forum, when you say far away, Demis, how long do you mean? He said, at least 3 to 5 years. And you're kind of, wow, whatever the conversations are now, in 5 years, we could be in a completely different game. But quantum as well is something that everything is 1,000x.
Yeah.
Just give us some sense of, again, I must admit, I immediately feel a nervousness when I think, whatever the problems we have now, try 1,000xing those to see what happens. But Dimple, defender first, give us the reassurance around IBM are at the frontier of quantum development. You're already, you have systems in place and you're already piloting and showing how quantum can change some of these asymmetries that we're looking at the moment.
Yeah, look, I'm excited about the value to society that we're going to see from quantum. Personally, I see about the type of complex problems around, particularly related to healthcare and solving for ailments that have, or sicknesses that have lasted for a while. On the security side, there's a lot of debate, right? So organizations initially, when I started having this conversation, in fact, I think my first board conversation was in the London about it with a client. And their initial times like, Dimple, we have 100 other things that are more existential risk to us right now. This quantum thing, the risk related to it, it's 5 years. We'll get to it. And I say, yeah, that's fair. You have to focus on your immediate concerns. But let's put that into perspective a little bit in terms of the post-quantum cryptography and Q-Day. So when quantum computing is, the use cases can be proven at scale and all that kind of stuff. There's the part about what IBM calls quantum safe and being ready for that Q-Day. Look, put aside whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 2 years, doesn't really matter. The risk at the moment, so you need to be looking at particular organizations who have data where the data has a longer lifetime. So 10 years or more. There are a lot of things in our life that have value for that data beyond 10 years. Our national identities and your healthcare, like a lot of things, right? And so couple of things that you're looking at is one of the biggest things that we're looking at advising clients is this notion of harvest now, decrypt later. So that essentially means that attackers, like there's some sense of security where people say, yeah, I know my data, I had loss of data, but it was encrypted. I'm good. right? Well, with this, just like we've seen with frontier models and their ability to identify vulnerabilities at a rapid pace, well, in this world, what you're going to find is that all the protections we have with that encrypted data, they tend to be at risk. Because harvest now, decrypt later essentially is that attackers who are already getting our data today, when the quantum computing is available, they will have the ability to decrypt it. And so all of that data that has a shelf life of greater than 10 years is at risk, right? So you can debate now. We all know that anyone who's been through any sort of a modernization or transformation program, these programs have a long tail because you have to, first of all, understand all the areas where your encryption is. You have to understand so basically take inventory of it, right? Otherwise, how are you going to protect if you don't know about it? Then you're looking at having a plan of what am I going to put in place? Crypto agility is a term that we're looking at. So whatever algorithm it is, rather than focusing on that, being able to protect the data regardless, and having a plan for that and getting stakeholder buy-in, because it's not a security issue, by the way, in the sense that security is not security owned alone. It is a business issue that people across the organization have to look at around the importance of the data. How do you look at updating your systems, updating the encryption models that are protecting that data, and so on. So that's really been the conversation, is before you know it, it's going to be that time. And so start working now and chipping away at the problem. So every time you update or to a new server or protection systems, make sure that, again, talking to your partners, look at what their strategy is, so that when you invest in something and you upgrade it, slowly you're chipping away and improving your security posture, right? So that you're ready for that time frame. So one is look at what you have, and two is, as you go about your business on an everyday basis, start addressing the problem set.
Is there a practical for just us as individuals to be thinking about quantum now, or is that not? You're shaking your head, Matt.
No,
I don't need
as
to
a
think
consumer,
too much.
you
consumer,
consume
yeah.
as a commodity.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I would
Love
say,
that bit of reassurance there.
Yeah. So I'm just going to actually underline that a bit, because if you think about it as a consumer, we've talked about your personal devices and such, right? The people who have been, and this should give reassurance, the people who have been already addressing this are organizations that are responsible for our critical infrastructure. Including telecommunications, right? So we have those. We have financial services organizations who are already addressing it. So there are companies that web browsers, right? So as consumers, there's a little bit of an expectation, and rightly so, is that the other companies and organizations will do their bit, so that when it comes to the citizens, there's less of that. Like, look at AI and shadow AI, but quantum computing and protecting
So my
that.
very rude WhatsApps to John about our bosses are safe for the next 10 years. That's your guarantee.
Well, hopefully that doesn't have a shelf life.
John, you and I will be dead by then, so it won't matter. So lights up. And just before we come to questions, I just wanted to ask the two experts on this panel, a lot of you in this audience said that you felt that the attackers were winning. Hands up if you feel, I'm going to set a low bar, slightly more reassured. It's a bit of a test for Matt and you, Dimple. Slightly more reassured now you've heard from two experts in the field that the defenders might be slightly stronger than you thought at the beginning. Slightly more reassured. Okay. Hey, now that's not a bad little test there.
Can I quickly say one thing? That ratio is actually also the ratio of security leaders. When I talk to my peer group, they're probably 80% attacker
are in
advantage. Yeah.
Well,
so it is a minority view that.
So thank you. So a little bit of reassurance there. That was good.
Well,
John, you probably scared the pants off all of us, but that's good, John.
I'm trying to be the voice of reassurance.
Absolutely. Okay, let's have questions. Someone right here, absolutely fabulous. Other questions? And the person there. So here we are, here first, and then, yeah.
So I'd want to say it's really interesting, really, great to have this discussion. But one of the things that I was thinking was, we've talked a lot about risks, cybersecurity, and one of the risks that I would love to discuss another time maybe is
right now. This is the point.
Risk to us as humans staying relevant. And I suppose that could translate to companies staying individual perhaps as well, because I didn't know that this, and I've loved it, but I didn't know that we'd be discussing basically cybersecurity. And I think that is so relevant and also interesting to discuss how AI is going to be exciting, but how we can stay humanly relevant. Yeah. And hold our place.
That notion of the wider context, I think for the two of you who are experts, as you say, in a vertical, how does it fit into the wider context that maybe, Jon, you or I are much more involved in, which is the broader sense of AI and what it is here to do, as well as that security issue, which I think is slightly where we're going there.
Yeah, I'll just say a few things quickly. I think if we're not deliberate, there is a risk that AI displaces human labour, and therefore there's just a real impact on the jobs market if we're not deliberate. However, thinking about cybersecurity for a moment, what it's really good at doing is getting rid of like fiddly, repetitive, frustrating, busy work that actually crushes us as humans. It doesn't allow us to do the things we're good at. If you get rid of that, you can go up the value chain. You can do more interesting, impactful, creative things that actually leverage our human capabilities rather than machine capabilities, if we're intentional, if we design with the end in mind. And the thing I would say, like, what are we really good at doing is, like, as humans, we're really good at, like, relating, but also like being creative and thinking about problems a different way around. Whereas AI is just applied statistics. It will just keep doing the thing that it expects should be done next. Discuss. So like, if we do a good job of this, we can frankly get ourselves more onto the frontier, doing more valuable things that leverage our human capabilities, that have more impact, that are more valuable, and frankly, the economy will be more productive, we'll get paid more, happy days. But we have to really be intentional to get there. Because if you just let this thing roll, and the measure of its efficacy is whether it does a human job better than a human, good luck, everyone.
Yeah. Look, I'm gonna answer it in a couple parts here. Personally, right? So there's an expectation certainly within our business to continue for our stakeholders and stockholders to show that we're being more productive, we're being more efficient in our whatever that job is, whether that is HR, whether that's finance, right? So there's an expectation, and therefore there's lots of training and relevance. But then there's the human side, where when we do look at adoption of it, people love to use it in their personal life, but as defenders, initial kind of like the conversations that we have is the initial reaction was a little bit less than enthusiastic around using it, because individuals first was, well, what does this mean for my job? And when we talked about it and we said, look, at the end of it, it is, I kind of frame it as augmented intelligence, in the sense that there are individuals who are inundated with a lot of repetitive tasks that, as was just mentioned, right? And so if you free them up from that and give them an ability to grow, there's a lot of institutional knowledge that individuals have about culture, about business operations, all those kind of things. So if you reduce that, people actually have a moment to breathe and apply their skills in a different way. And so it gives growth opportunities, though it may not be the most intuitive thing for people to see it as such. And so that's been kind of like a turning point, is having that open dialogue, understanding the concerns, appreciating and being very clear and intentional that, yeah, you do need to adopt it, because if you don't, somebody else will be. But here's how it helps. So it's about a conversation.
Just on, I don't know how many practical examples you've had of interacting with AI. I mean, I went to the doctors the other day, and the doctor said to me, "Right, I'm going to be recording this because AI is taking detail of all of this." And I thought that's a bit weird. And the session, my appointment ended, 5 or 10 minutes later, and I'd been saying, "Oh well, I've got a bit of an ache here, and there's a pain there, and I've been coughing." It was all written up in a medical, professional way, instantly. That would have probably taken the doctor 10 or 15 minutes, and that is 10 or 15 minutes to treat the next patient. Against that, a colleague who works on the newsagents, her son, who was 6 or 7, had terrible kind of allergic reaction in his eyes, and they thought it just needed antihistamines, went to see the GP, and the GP said, no, it's just allergies. And the kid couldn't see anything. And that evening, they put all the data into ChatGPT, and he was a software engineer, so he kind of knew what he was doing, and went to Moorfields the next day, and ChatGPT had nailed it, absolutely got it right. And so, that is where this technology can come to our help as well.
Question there, yep.
I was going to ask, do you not accept the old adage that it's a matter of when, not if, an organisation is breached? And does the examples you've given tonight suggest maybe not enough focus is given on recovering rather than defending?
Yep, that's really interesting. And a question here, we'll just take a few because there's so many of you who want to make points and questions. Another one here, yep.
Hi, I'm Alex. Thanks, panel. First question is, it seems like you guys are caught between two modes. One mode is patching yesterday's breach, and the second mode is building an architecture for tomorrow's threat. So how do you balance being in those two modes, and how do you budget for something with no clear ending? And the second question was a quick one for maybe more Jon, is there anything we can learn from the UAE in terms of AI governance?
Excellent, okay. And then one more, this gentleman at the back there, yeah.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the location of where these hacks come from, and I was really interested to hear how geopolitics comes into play. And I guess the most obvious example might be the war of Russia and Ukraine, and how much influence Putin can have on increasing the number of attacks, cyber attacks on companies in the West.
Fantastic. So first question around recovery. It's not if, but it's when. And so therefore, how does cybersecurity work in the recovery phase? From the IBM breach reports, the costs of recovery are major, and even after a long period, 64% of the enterprises said they were still suffering from a breach. Matt.
So like the framing of the question is absolutely right. And we have to keep two things in our mind at the same time. The job is to stop it happening every day. Every discretionary moment of effort has to be on stopping it from happening. And at the same time, assume that it might. And if it might, that you've got the ability to recover, that it's exercised, that you know how to do it. So when your hair's on fire, you're ready to go. And you have to do both those things at the same time, which is kind of a bit of a weird mindset. You're absolutely right that like generally speaking, most organizations have got more to do on the second thing, and the second thing is even harder again. So yes, you have to do that. The only thing is though, but you never give up on the first thing. Because it can be catastrophic.
And I think, Dimple, that actually connects with the second question, which is, so there's the recovery phase, and there's also, I love the way you put it, patching for now and preparing for an indistinct and never-ending possibility graph for the future. And balancing between those two things, as well as remembering the recovery phase, that's a lot of things to think about in only one part of your business, as I say, which is up against, but we've got this splashy new product to announce, we've got this new customer thing to do, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, look, I think the patching bit is hygiene. There are smarter ways of sometimes doing it rather than getting overwhelmed, and that goes a little bit towards the risk discussion we've been having, right? So absolutely, it is essential, and it needs to happen. But the preparedness for the future, personally, in having been in protecting roles, right? So I spend a lot of time around the latter. The first, it needs to be part of the DNA. The latter, I also align it to understanding the business and where the business is going. Because it's really important. I think some people have a tendency to think, well, cyber is just going to go do their technical bit and they're going to protect, and then they're going to help us recover our operations. But what sometimes catches people off guard is when they don't know what their business is actually about. What are the new things that you're developing? What are the new partnerships? What do those partnerships really mean? What are the type of things you're doing, services you're delivering to clients or products? And who is that ultimate client and how they're going to be impacted? Taking all of those factors, so when you're designing, you're kind of learning from your vulnerabilities and your experiences and incidents and all, but building a more resilient environment, and then also pressure testing it. So, it's the muscle building skill I was saying about practicing. So assume breach, and as you're building new things, assume breach. It will happen. There's not an organization that can say they're protected from that. But it's really the importance of how do you recover. And more of the senior leaders are not asking about what will you do to prevent a breach, but it is rather how do we minimize business disruption and operational disruption, and how do we maintain stakeholder trust. And so that's really where, like, I'm advising and certainly protecting or spending much of my time is that latter bit.
Jon, let's go to the geopolitical question. I was at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. I interviewed there Kate Crawford, and she's the professor of artificial intelligence at the University of Southern California. And she said that the Iran conflict was one of the first agentic AI conflicts. And she used a chilling phrase. Agentic AI had shortened the kill train. It had meant that military decisions could be made at a greater speed than previously, when you needed human beings to say the targeting, the deployments, and then you have drone technology as well connected to it. And it does connect Putin, Ukraine, the Gulf, the UAE, and that, again, we're in a world where your point about the sort of governance of even the rules of war, I've likened it to a sort of steam train trying to catch a cheetah. It's how do you look at the global risk aspects of where agentic AI can make decisions about things of such import, but are still in the hands of the AI providers? And look at the arguments that have been between Anthropic and OpenAI and the Department for War in America, et cetera, et cetera.
Look, we've spent the evening talking about AI, and the implications are massive, but also just in terms of defense and what we consider to be the rules of warfare have completely been transformed by what's happened in Iran, by what's happened in Ukraine. And we have seen Russia use hypersonic missiles that are going incredible speed. If a hypersonic missile is fired at America, the conventional thing is that, some listening post, they ring up, whoever at the chairman of the Joint Chiefs office, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs is told, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs then gets onto the White House and rings up the White House and says, I speak to the national security person, who then, if it's urgent enough, would patch it through to the President of the United States. Well, sorry, too slow. The hypersonic missile has hit, and therefore you haven't got time to have those human chains in the connection. You have an AI model that is deciding when to retaliate. And the risks, of course, of that are immense. If you don't have that, then you are attacked and you don't defend yourself. And the risk, though, of a war is being declared by AI, and it sounds like something out of science fiction, where no human is involved in the decision-making because AI has taken on that responsibility. I mean, we build these aircraft carriers that cost billions, and you've seen what drones can do that cost $200 or $300. And you can swarm an aircraft carrier in next to no time. And so they are just become sitting targets. So everything we have thought we knew about defense, and, this is not my area of expertise. With regards to Russia, I suspect that my understanding is that the Russian intelligence, the GRU, they have certain latitude to do what they want to do in certain operations, to disrupt or to affect the cyber operations or cut submarine cables or whatever it happens to be. They can do this stuff. Obviously, if it gets to a really state where there might be a military response from America or from NATO, then probably Putin does have to sign that off at the moment. But the direction of travel is such that we're going in an area where AI is going to decide. The parameters will be put into AI. And, you don't need to go into some of the horrors of what's happened in Gaza. But, Israeli military were using AI. They saw the pattern of the movement of 3 vehicles and decided they were terrorist vehicles. And they were aid workers. And they're blown to pieces. So, AI is not risk-free in that sense.
We're running out of time a little bit, but there's someone there and then someone there. It'd be great, those two there. And one over this side.
Very short. Ewan Grant, UK Defence Forum, in a previous role, which was not a government role, I and my colleagues were hacked by the Russians. And we got hostile phone calls from British proxies. Question: do we have to move to, frankly, offensive cyber, and the threat of that on the grounds of, like nuclear, deterrence might not be perfect, but it can work?
And the person behind in the glasses, yep.
Thank you so much. Sir, I think I might open a new can of worms here, so I apologize in advance, but I'm very curious to know more about the neurotechnology landscape and what are some of the, I would say, speculative challenges that come in the arena of cybersecurity within the neurotechnology realm. I know that the legislation is already so far behind in AI, it must be like leagues far behind when it comes to neurotech, but that's the emerging market.
Thank you. And there was a question. Oh, yes, that was it there. Thank you. This will be the last one, so sorry.
So enterprises are trying to build AI agents in-house, so about AI governance. So for example, one interesting use case is allowing AI agents to connect to all your database so that you can answer all the questions about data analytics, potentially automating your business intelligence questions, things like that. So from your perspective, how would you advise executive to balance between opportunity and risk? Governing the access of AI agents is a nightmare, but it's a huge gain from there. So how would you balance that risk and opportunity?
Fantastic. Matt, should we go backwards?
Yeah,
maybe
please.
You could answer the first one first. I'll come to you about neurotechnology. Is that not that's not making you feel comfortable? Okay, maybe not that. Do you want to talk about nuclear arms race in AI and what does the deterrence? Right? Is that better for you?
Yeah.
Neurotechnology, John, I'm not imagining that's your strong suit in the most intense way.
I thank you for glossing over the question about UAE governance models.
Well, I did put it in there, but he didn't answer, as you'll notice.
Not my expertise.
Yes, yeah. Okay, we'll do our very best with neurotechnology, but you make a very good point, because not everyone can be expert in everything. But first question, Matt, to you.
It's a huge topic, and I'm going to therefore try and be really brief. So basically, you've got 2 agentic paradigms: on behalf of, and then fully autonomous. On behalf of is effectively using your permissions as a human and doing things as if it were you. Okay, and there's a whole identity and access model around that. And then the under the bonnet agent is actually doing things autonomously, like as if it were an engineer in your environment. It's got a completely different identity and access model. And the point is, the first thing is kind of like Gen AI and sort of quite basic use cases, and we can keep our arms around it. The second thing is where both the opportunity and the risk is. And we have to experiment to fail and fail fast and learn, and that's the chapter we're in right now. So you have to absolutely constrain the access and the permissions that those autonomous agents have, really make them fine-grained, make the tasks and the permissions ephemeral, so they do a thing that's guardrailed and then it's burned down, so it can't kind of go off with a life of its own. And an experiment in like a non-production contained area, so you learn what it's doing, what it's not doing, and we build guardrails on that basis. And like this is like industry is thinking through and solving this stuff right now. If you run in front of where the safety and the guardrails are, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I'll just add one point to that. It's like you were touching on non-human identities with the agents and their identity, right? Like, it's fabulous that data can be analyzed and harnessed and great insights can be provided. But just because agents have the ability to do that, the guardrails really are important to say, should these agents be doing these functions? Who's doing these functions? And treating those agents with the same level of identity so that you have the ability to again, protect.
Jon? No, I'm joking.
I
Dimple,
lean out of the way.
Is there anything, just around the question, which was a really important one, but maybe not quite for this panel, I don't know, but Dimple, the notion of, we've talked about defenders.
Yeah.
Is there an offense way of thinking about cybersecurity? I'm not sure we're going to get to almost the weaponization of AI to go out from this, but this is a very interesting question.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
It's always seen as defend.
Yeah.
Is there something that you can do offense?
100%. So look, there are all kinds of proactive and preventative measures we take in cyber. Matt touched on around identities. Identities are the new perimeter, right? So like protecting those and really looking at it. But one offensive, I'll say, is offensive testing. So it's a common practice where people call them white hatters, ethical hackers. Like, the terms, names have changed over a period of time. But essentially, the concept is you let trusted parties and people with skills, hacker-level skills, to go at it. And before you roll anything out, you make sure that they identify your weak spots so that you can fix them before the adversaries or the attackers do. And so on a day-to-day basis, not likely at the level that you're perhaps proposing or suggesting, but in terms of the concept is there, I guess is my point, right? It's been done in a more managed fashion, and it is about strengthening the security posture and confidence in the solutions that get put into production and all those kind of stuff. But there's absolutely offensive security teams that come attack in a coordinated fashion, so you identify the weak spots. They also do it with the defenders so that if you're attacking and the defenders don't see it, then you also know there are gaps, right? And this goes back to the point we've been making about rehearsing, practicing, and strengthening, and it's an ongoing thing. So.
Yeah. So apologies about the slight lack of expertise on neurotechnology on this panel, but to Intelligence Squared and our colleagues in the audience, we'll come to that next. We must do a thing on that area, and we'll get Demis Hassabis on this bloody thing, and he can talk about how he's going to solve disease, which will be brilliant. We're at time, I'm afraid, but I just want to finish on a note of some reassurance, or give us a sentence around where this is going so we can leap off into the dark night now outside, Matt, and don't fear getting attacked on our way home by cyber security issues. So just to sum up what we've heard this evening, what is the one key takeaway for us to leave with maybe a little bit more of a bounce in our step rather than a weight on our back?
Yeah, a couple of things. So, like, the weather outside is pretty bad, and yet this set of developments is a forcing function. It kind of forces us to the future, to modernize how we do cybersecurity, and the power of the tools that we now have. If we deploy them, home field advantage, we can actually do a better job than we've ever done. It's a contingent statement. We have to do that. We can't wait around, but we are forced into getting to really good, and therefore we will.
Jon.
We're all terrified by change, but what of the new technologies that we have now would we say our lives were better without them? We make progress. The human condition is to make progress. And we put seatbelts in cars, to go back to your analogy. so that we could maybe go a bit faster. And I think that if it is eliminating from us having to do the drudge in our lives that just takes time and is boring, and we've got more time to explore nature or to climb a mountain or to read a book or to enjoy a beautiful piece of music, then happy days. And so I think there are, right to be concerned, of course, right to have guardrails, right to erect kind of certain safety barriers, but don't just think, okay, well, I'm cutting myself off from it.
Dimple, leave us with just a note maybe that we leave tonight on a slight up curve.
Yeah. So look, one, I agree. Changes can be challenging and uncomfortable, but I think we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable in this case because that's progress. I would say two things that keep me optimistic and going. One is these kind of conversations, because the more we talk about it and we improve, right? We learn from experience and such. And security is now at a stage where it's not in the bowels of some organization in a basement, but it really is that business discussion around protection. The second thing I would say is, as much as people are concerned about, in some cases, job security with innovations around AI, I'll tell you, in cyber, many organizations who don't have the financial backing and investments or the scale of talent has struggled in terms of how do you protect. And with AI, I think there's a tremendous opportunity because we have had in cyber millions of unfilled jobs, which have made it difficult to find the right skills and so on. And with this, and using AI for defend purposes, it gives us everybody a level playing field where instead of always looking at adding people, you get to augment. And perhaps that 3-person team can really act more like a 30-person team, right? So, like I said, autonomous security is now, and how it complements the defenders is going to be a beautiful thing.
Fabulous. Thanks so much to Intelligence Squared, to IBM. Thank you very much for listening. Such a great debate and being involved in that debate. Thank you, Jon. Thank you, Dimple. Thank you, Matt. And safe journeys, everyone.
Thank you.
Home. Thank you very much.